Hello, Noemi here, and welcome to this talk. Today we're going to be talking about how to supercharge the growth of your email newsletter, meaning how to get more subscribers and create a bigger audience to share your work with. Um, as for me, I'm the publisher of a newsletter called Fresh Fonts, in which I share new typefaces release that were designed by independent designers and small type foundries from pretty much everywhere in the world. I've been publishing it for 3 years now, and it has gathered an audience of nearly 20,000 subscribers. So it's been growing pretty fast. Although I never spent any money on advertising the newsletter online, so its growth has been organic and mostly fueled by word of mouth. So today I'm going to be talking about how I made this happen and how you can do it too. But before we jump in, I just wanted to say a few words about newsletters. Do newsletters still matter? I think is a legit question to ask, given the amount of social media that there is out there and new ones that keep popping up, like TikTok is very trending right now. So why still publish a newsletter? Well, actually, I think that newsletter matter more than ever before now. Because it has become incredibly hard to reach people on social media. It's a lot of work and it's very time consuming to manage. And even on Instagram, for instance, even if you do get a lot of followers, they're very likely to like your posts and consume your content, but actually never go and visit your website. So newsletters are still one of the best source of traffic for your website because newsletters do attract people to your website. And if you're trying to sell something, this traffic will also have a much higher conversion rate. Why? Because obviously the people who are subscribed to your newsletter, they know your work or your brand. They are interested in what you do. And so they're very likely to come back and buy again from you if you can keep them engaged and with your content and invite them back to your website. So if there is one communication channel that you should be focusing on, I do believe that it should be your email newsletter. But still, obviously, publishing a newsletter alone is not enough. You're still competing with so many emails and so many other newsletters, and obviously people don't have much time to read. So, well, you probably yourself read only about a handful of newsletters. So, as you can imagine, the only way that you can make your newsletter stand out is by sharing content that is useful and that people love and that they look forward to receiving every time. And I say that not only because, of course, it's gratifying to send a newsletter that people really enjoy reading, but because that's also the key to growing your email list. So it might sound cheesy, but I do believe that love creates growth. And most importantly, love creates organic growth. Of course, marketers will tell you that there are plenty of ways to grow your email newsletter, for instance, by having a referral program in place or advertising on other newsletters and so on. Of course, many of those things work, but none of them are necessary. None of them will replace sharing good content that is useful and that solves a problem. So if you can figure out how to do that, your newsletter will grow organically without you having to spend time and money on actively seeking new subscribers. So now how do we actually create a newsletter that people love. There are basically 4 pieces of advice that I wanted to share with you today. First one is, don't make this about yourself. What I mean by that is that you shouldn't be talking about you and about your work in your newsletter. Instead, I would encourage you to think about your newsletter as a product of its own. So I would suggest that you find a specific topic that you're interested in, that you will enjoy researching and writing about, and that is also very aligned with the work that you do. And this topic should be the focus of your newsletter. Let me show you an example of what I mean by that. So Calibre is a product, it's an app actually, that lets you monitor your web performance. And they do publish a newsletter called the Performance Newsletter. So it has its own name, and the content is very aligned with the work that they do. I believe that they send it twice a month. And well, as you can see, it includes many links and articles about web performance, obviously. And it's also signed by them, but the newsletter has its own name. And interestingly, they do use it every now and then to share an update about their product, or, you know, to plug their product every now and then in the newsletter, although most of the content is actually not about themselves. So I think this is a great strategy, because then the newsletter is not just a channel that you can use to share your work every now and then when you have something to share, but instead you are able to send it more regularly, and by doing that you will grow a much bigger audience and you will keep them engaged. The benefit of that is that, of course, whenever you actually have something to show, like a new typeface release, for example, you can still plug it in the newsletter, and it's going to get much more visibility and it's going to have much more impact. Now moving on to the second advice, which is to validate your content with your audience. What I mean by that is that before you start spending time on putting together the newsletter and sending it, I suggest that you run a test to make sure that this content would be useful for your audience. The best way that I found to test this is by doing a simple coming soon landing page. So, you know, that would mean just making a landing page that explains the value proposition of your newsletter and that allows people to sign up by email to get notified whenever the newsletter is going to launch. I personally did this 3 years ago before I started sending fresh fonts. So I'm going to show you the coming soon test landing page that I had done back then. I'm actually a bit ashamed to show you this because it's definitely scrappy. I mean, as you can see, the design is excessively basic. It just explains what the newsletter is about and let people subscribe to the newsletter. Of course, the conversion rate would have been much higher if the page had a nicer design and if you could see an example email of the newsletter, which I couldn't do back then because this was before I actually started shipping the newsletter. But still, I just, quickly put this page out there. I had used TinyLetter to do it, which I'm not sure even exists today. Still exists today. In any case. And then I shared this link on a couple of forums for designers, since the target of my newsletter are basically graphic designers and visual designers. And then I was having a look at how the idea was received and if people were actually going to sign up on the page. And it actually worked fairly well. I got more than 260 people to subscribe within a couple of days. So that's what made me think that, there actually was a need for this newsletter. So now I felt confident in spending a lot of time researching fonts and new release and putting together this newsletter. So I would really suggest that you do the same. If you don't know how to get started, I would recommend MailChimp. I don't use MailChimp for my newsletter because I think there are so many features that it has become slightly overwhelming. I would suggest something more simple to begin with. But the cool thing about MailChimp is that they offer landing pages, which are totally free. And so this would be perfect for you to get started, just to explain the idea that you have for your newsletter and share it around on the web and see if people are actually interested in that. Also, I'm not sure this is still part of the free plan, but MailChimp offers A/B testing, meaning that if you have a few ideas for the content of your newsletter, you could test these ideas against each other and see which one gets the most people to subscribe to. So if you try this but you don't get at least a couple of hundred people to sign up, that might be because either people are not really interested in what you want to talk about, or because the people who are interested in what you want to talk about are actually hard to find online. Either way, I would suggest that you try another idea and test it until you are able to get at least a couple of hundred people to sign up for your newsletter. Just to make sure that you're not gonna spend a lot of time on the newsletter and hardly getting read. Let's move on to my third advice today, which is to offer a high value lead magnet. Now, what the hell is a lead magnet? You've probably seen this before. Lead magnets are usually something that you get offered for free when you sign up to a newsletter. Very often it's like a 10% discount on your first purchase or things like that. It could be a free download as well, like a free PDF or a free ebook. An example in the type industry would be from the type foundry Typotech. So as you can see on their website, they offer 20 euros off any of their font if you sign up for their mailing list. So this is a technique that I've used to quickly grow my own newsletter. I took the idea a little bit further and I commissioned the Type Foundry pizza typefaces to design a typeface exclusively for me, which is called Gangster Grotesk. Don't ask me why. I'm actually the person who named it. There's no other reason than, I don't know, that day when I woke up, I was feeling gangsta and I decided it was a cool name. If it was to do again, I'm not sure I would name it like that again, but at least people kind of remember the name of this typeface. So don't blame pizza typefaces for the bad naming here. This is totally on me. In any case, so the guys designed this typeface and I made a mini site for it. So on this mini site, people can sign up for my newsletter and as a result get the typeface for free. That's actually the only way that you can get the typeface. In my case, it made a lot of sense to offer a free typeface as a lead magnet, since my newsletter is actually about typefaces, right? So I was kind of making sure that the people that I was attracting and who were subscribing to the newsletter to get the typeface to begin with would be interested in the actual content of the newsletter afterwards. So now that I had a mini site promoting the typeface, what I did was to share it around on the web, on Behance, for example, where it got a good amount of visibility and still does today. So actually, I get a lot of traffic from Behance to the mini site and a very high conversion there. So most of the people who subscribe to the newsletter today are still attracted by this hook, this lead magnet, the typeface that Pizza Typeface designed a couple of years ago. So I would encourage you to think about a lead magnet that has a lot of value for your audience, meaning more than 20 euros, but that's something that is actually very valuable to them. It could be a typeface, obviously, but I'm sure you can think of something more original. Like, for example, it could be a guide on how to pair typefaces together, which is always something that people struggle with, or, any other thing that you could come up with, and that people who would enjoy the content of your newsletter would find helpful, and that would really motivate them to sign up for your newsletter. And now moving on to my last piece of advice, which is to ship the newsletter consistently. It might sound silly, of course, but no strategy is ever going to replace consistency. So I would suggest that you send at least one issue of the newsletter every month. I think making it monthly is actually a good frequency, meaning that it's probably not too much work for you, but it will get your audience used to receiving your newsletter and build the habit of reading it. So, well, to sum it up, this were my 4 advices today. Let me get my face out of the way. Don't make the newsletter about yourself. Validate the content with your audience. Offer a very high value lead magnet for free, and ship the newsletter consistently. So that was pretty much it. I hope this was useful in some way. See you in a minute at the live Q&A. If for some reason you couldn't attend the Q&A, or if you didn't have a chance to ask me a question, just hit me up on Twitter.